Something is shifting. Can you feel it? Might not be loud or dramatic if this isn't hitting your chart directly. This might be something happening quietly in the undercurrents of the architecture of your mind, or in the air and the wind blowing around us right now as it's picking up outside my house here. But this solar eclipse in Aquarius, it's not about emotional overwhelm. It's more about awareness, about lift, about something you can't quite put your finger on yet. A new thought, a new realization, a new direction could be quick, abrupt shift, pivot, change. Welcome to Astrology Intuition with Amy Lynn. This is a space where we make personal sense of the cosmic energies that we are living within. This is a way to find deeper clarity, deeper meaning, deeper sense of how your own personal state might be affected by the energetics. It's not just you. In this episode, I'm going to explore today's solar eclipse in Aquarius. It's also a new moon. And this is the energy that's going to be covering the next couple of weeks of time because each lunation cycle brings a personal quality, kind of brings the cosmic energies down to earth, so to speak. So at the end of this podcast, I'll be pulling up the chart and looking through the technical placements, the transits, the timelines, the details. But for this part, I just want to give you kind of an overview of the energies so that you have some guidance of how to work with these energies in real time, how what you might be feeling and experiencing in your life is the cosmic weather, not necessarily something personal, although it can feel very personal. And if you like having something physical to work with to help guide you through these energies, you can grab my Lunar Intentions Planner. It's on Amazon for $28. I'll put a link in the show notes below. This is a tangible week by week guide that I so lovingly prepared for you. I made it myself. I wrote it myself using all my intuitive reads on the astrological energies. I create this quarter by quarter. So this is for the first quarter of 2026. And that's because the energies are changing wildly quickly. So I'm only giving you information 3 months at a time because that's how fast things are changing and we're needing to adjust. So the next quarter, quarter two, will be available in about a month. Anyway, let's step into this eclipse energy. I'm sure you're feeling it. There might be a density, there might be a heaviness, there might be a slog or a bogged down quality. There might just be that sense of something uncertain on the horizon that gives a little spark of anxiety because you just can't quite tell what's coming. This is an air sign eclipse. Aquarius is an air sign. So that has to do with ideas, connections. This one in particular has to do with collective energies. It could feel like the winds of change. That's like the vibe of an eclipse happening in an air sign. And eclipses, if you think about them astronomically, what's happening with a new moon eclipse is that you have the sun being blocked by the moon and leaving the earth to its own energy. So basically, the solar light, the life force energy of the sun is switching off and back on. So it's kind of like a restart or a reboot energy, but it also leaves us here without the light of the sun, without that solar energy feeding our own life force, where we're left to feel ourselves, to be left to our own devices, so to speak, or to our own signal. So that's another thing I want to talk about. I really feel that there's a signal kind of upgrade in the quality of the Aquarian eclipse happening right now. So you might feel off. You might even feel like things you're touching are breaking or not working. Like there's like an energetic quality that can be almost like an electrical current. There is actually Mercury is, and it's not retrograde yet, but it's in its shadow. And that has that same kind of feel that we talk about with Mercury retrogrades, where you're like, things just aren't working. But there's more of like you're like a static cling, like a I can't think of what that's called. When you like touch something and it sparks, like there's that kind of, it's like the touch, the electrical current is trying to figure itself out. Like you're not grounded literally, like how you ground an electrical current in your home. Okay. So what else do I tell you about this? Obviously, this anything that happens with astrology, it's very much about exactly where it's happening. And do you personally have anything in your own birth chart in that place or in a geometric angle to it? Do you have anything squaring it? So this is happening at the tail end of Aquarius. So I'll get to the specifics at the end of the podcast, but just to be following along, if you do know your chart, we're talking about the squaring and the opposition energies are happening in fixed signs. So at the end of Taurus, at the end of Leo, and at the end of Aquarius. And uh, did I say all of them? Oh my gosh. It's so interesting. I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a second because there is this like mental, it's not quite like mental fog. It's like you're on one track, like a channel, and then the station just switches. And I keep having this. It's like my brain's like off and on. It's so fascinating how this is happening. Anyway, the fixed signs are Leo, uh, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So anything at the tail end of those signs, it's really hard to get back on track. This is so interesting. By the way, I usually record my podcast, as you probably know, in like one take. I'm usually doing it live while I'm on Instagram. I tried to record this last night about 5 times, and there were just, it's like the signal couldn't match into my brain. Anyway, very interesting. So, another thing that's happening that's specific to this eclipse energy is a square from Uranus. And this is an energy that brings abrupt awakening, abrupt change, quick pivots, unexpected, like just the curveball you didn't see coming. Um, it doesn't, it's not good or bad. I know sometimes I say that and it comes across like it can be interpreted like, oh my God, what's happening? It could be awesome. It could be like great news. Something just lands in your lap kind of energy. It can also be like a radical clarity, like you just it's like you can't unsee the thing you just saw or unknow the thing you know now. It has that kind of energy too. Lot of unexpected vibes though, so be on your toes. And how dramatic that is going to be for you does have to do with how that's hitting your chart. So let's just talk about the energy of eclipses too. It's really interesting because I think there's a lot in the kind of Instagram realm of astrology that's like, it's a portal, it's an opening, it's an arrival. I don't know. I hear my clients talking about these things. And eclipses are very they're kind of slow to understand, even if they happen quickly. So it's not like we're going to wake up today and the world is new, although there could be new information that feels that way. But it's like the integration of the shifting of whatever that new thing is can take quite some time, oftentimes even 6 months until we get to the next eclipse season. So every year we have two eclipse seasons. We call it that because there's always at least two eclipses in a row, a new moon and a full moon, a little pack a couple weeks apart. So we'll have our next eclipse happening March 3rd. Interestingly, the eclipses this year are in 4 different zodiac signs. Typically, they're in two along one axis. But because the nodes are changing this summer, we're getting this kind of peekaboo time. So this is our first eclipse happening in Aquarius in quite some time. About 9 years ago, we had eclipses along this axis, but it was flip-flopped. So it was a south node Aquarius. And then it would have been about 18 years ago, the last time we had a north node eclipse in Aquarius. So we're getting into this new energy. And you probably are aware that there's other massive transit storyline happening this week. So on Friday the 20th, we have this huge conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, and we're already feeling into that too because Saturn moved into Aries on Friday the 13th. And Neptune already had moved into Aries, so they're just nearing each other. They're getting closer and closer, and so that's something we're like definitely feeling. Um, so there is this way that it's kind of a confusing energy because we have the quickness of the eclipse, which is like the lights on, lights off. And then we have the unexpected of the squaring or the check-in from that awakener Uranus, which is also the modern ruler of this eclipse. And then Saturn, the ancient ruler of this eclipse. That's because Saturn ruled Aquarius in ancient times, and in modern times, once we've discovered Uranus, we think of Uranus as being the ruler in modern astrology. So it's kind of got this dual rulership going on. And so as Saturn moves, I think a lot of us are feeling that if you have kind of a heaviness or a weightedness or a slowdown or an elephant sitting on your chest is one way that it can feel, or just like a lull or a despair or hopelessness, that kind of energy. Saturn can kind of bring that in. And so that's like heavy and slow, while we also have the Uranian quick and fast, and kind of both things are happening. So I think a lot of us are on this edgy place between those two vibes. You might be really wanting to feel a sense of space. Actually, one of my kind of guiding themes for this week in the planner was having space to breathe. So I want to bring that to you. I'm going to give you a list of some things you can do, some tools you can access, some practices you can use, and here in a few minutes. But before I do that, I just want to say that there is another kind of bigger theme with the Saturn Neptune conjunction is a sense of reinvention or creating from nothing. So when we're in this space, in my foundational work as an art therapist, which is what I've done for decades in my life, there's this idea of the void. It's like the space before the creation begins to become. And that's kind of where we are this whole week. It has this feeling of like the empty canvas and the thought process, the creative flow starting to perk up. So this is something that you can sort of archetypally connect with in yourself. You might have something like feeling like it's ready to emerge, or I was talking to someone last night who was saying that he's got something on the tip of his tongue that he just can't say yet. He can't form the words of it or have the thought connect through to his ability to verbalize it yet. That's totally the energy of this week. If you have Aries, if you have fire signs in your chart, if you have cardinal energies, I'll get into this later in the podcast as well, but that's where the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is happening. So it's a different place in the eclipse, but they're happening so simultaneously, and they're both such a big energy that's another way we're getting sort of this confusing mix of strong energies. Some reflection questions you can sit with as you're pondering some of the more detailed transit notes I'll go into later in this podcast episode would be things like what needs to shift in the collective? What is your part in that? What belief in your system, in your own ecosphere, what belief no longer fits? Where and how are you ready to think differently? There's a real future self energy here. If I had to pick one true theme that kind of brings together all of the transits right now, it's what is your future self, and how I'm working with this in my school for astrology, which I'll also put the link to that below. You can join anytime. It's a monthly membership situation. But what we're working with there is feeling the frequency of your future self, because everything is moving more and more to a quickening and to frequency and to energy only, and us having the understanding as we let go of the more physical, mental, emotional ways we've known ourselves, it's really shifting into having a frequency based foundation of understanding self and the world. And the change, like this is sort of like you're not gonna have a choice. Like that's happening no matter what. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it might be good to do some classes with me and start to learn how to work with the energies, because the future is energy, basically. Okay, so this is like your signal is awakening, and I want you to be kind of thinking about that and feeling that as we get into some of the deeper transit specifics. So let's shift to that next. So before we jump into the transits and looking at the chart, I'm going to actually read to you from my planner. This is a weekly planner that I created and designed to guide you weekly through the first quarter of the year. You can get it on Amazon. I already talked about it. It's awesome. The link is in the show notes. But what I'm going to do here is build out, I'm just going to read about the next couple of weeks and how the energy is like kind of folding over the time of the next couple of weeks. And then I'll go into the technicalities of the transit so you can really understand it deeper if you're at the place in your astrology journey where you are understanding how to work with these energies specifically to the degrees in your chart and where to find them. So first, let me just say this week where we have the eclipse and we have the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune happening in this week of time, this is really a week about feeling, giving yourself room to breathe, having space as much as you can. This is giving yourself space to feel your way through the rumbles, the surges, the fog. This is not a week to rush. It's not a week to rush action. It's not a week to rush clarity or demand answers. Something enormous is rearranging beneath the surface, and it needs room. Next week, once we get through all the big stuff already happening this week, next week, my notes are about how it's a residual week to what we're living through in this week. Okay, whatever's happening. The eclipse is passed by next week. Mercury retrograde is happening and slowing us down. But the effects are still moving through the system as we move toward the end of the month of February, often quietly and indirectly. Eclipses work on delayed timing, and what shifted earlier in the month continues to reorganize itself beneath the surface. At the same time, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries on February 20th remains active for really quite some time. This is something that is a chapter turn point. So there's like it can play out over years. So when I say this plays out over time, I'm not just talking about the next couple of weeks. This is going to be something that we're feeling for quite some time and orienting to. The Saturn Neptune conjunction may create a foggy, uncertain vibe where clarity cannot yet be forced. Neptune dissolves old reference points. Saturn insists that whatever emerges will take time to stabilize. Mercury in retrograde asks us to listen in the quiet and sit with our own knowing. This last week of February may feel slow, strange, or emotionally muted. Insight comes in fragments rather than answers. Mercury retrograde reinforces the need to pause, reflect, and revisit rather than push forward. It's not a week for conclusions or big decisions. It's a week for integration, rest, and patience with not knowing. I know that's such a hard one. By the end of the month, you may sense abrupt karmic redirection. What is forming now is real, but not ready to be named. So let this understanding arrive slowly. And I will be doing my next podcast in early March when we will be visiting with the new moon lunar eclipse happening in Virgo. So to close out today, I'm going to talk you through the transits themselves and the exact dates and times and all the details. So if that kind of stuff throws you off, don't worry about it. Stop the podcast here and I'll see you next time. If you like to understand the technicalities or if you're curious and want to start learning, I'll put a link below. I have a free um, resource, like a library you can go to where I have teaching videos that show you how to pull your own chart for free and how to start looking at them at this level like we're doing here. So if you're watching on video, I'm going to share my screen. And if you can see, it's okay if you can't, but if you are watching in video and you can see the chart, I want you to just always feel the pulse of energy first before you start looking at the technicalities. To visually describe what I'm looking at on my screen for those listening only, there are so many planets packed together into like kind of one quadrant or one quarter of the zodiac wheel. Now, we do have some big outer planet energies happening in two other places, but for the most part, everything's in Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. That's where everything is happening. So that quadrant of your chart, that whole chunk is getting really activated by all the different things we're talking about. Let me first name the dates that we have things happening. And I always have to kind of go back in time and swoop in the last couple of transits because we're still in the energies of things that happened over the weekend and for the past few days. So I think one thing we could really feel last week on Friday the 13th at 5:11 p.m. Mountain Time, Saturn moved into Aries. And this is a really big deal because it's not just the beginning of a new sign for Saturn, which Saturn moves signs about every 3 years. This is the beginning of moving through the entire zodiac wheel anew. So it's a 30-year chapter of Saturn moving all the way from the beginning to the end of the wheel. And Saturn is a planet that I think we feel it. You probably have some story from sometime around that part of the day on Friday where you can sense feeling something heavier or very tangible. It might have been pressure. There might have been a consequential energy. There might have been something about time. There might have been just like a feeling of a heaviness or something that you just couldn't shake that felt like it was out of your control. On the 15th, the sun squared Uranus. So that's the kind of energy of the abrupt, sudden, unexpected pivot, table flipping kind of energy. Probably something shifted if you have anything toward late degrees around 27 degrees of Aquarius or Taurus or the other fixed signs, Leo and Scorpio. You may have had something really change in your life. If you don't have that hitting your chart specifically, it probably is working with someone close to you. So you may be on sort of the adjacent energy of someone else's big sudden change, and you may be reacting to that. And the reason I especially want to call that out is because it's very close to this eclipse. So basically, this entire eclipse axis is squaring Uranus in Taurus. And that's a whole storyline all its own because Uranus has been transiting through Taurus for many years now and is going to be moving out of Taurus when we get into late April. So we're going to be talking about that energy more and more. And Uranus moving out of an earth sign and into an air sign again is something you're going to feel. We had a little peekaboo pop out of this last summer in 2025 where we get like the hint or the preview of this, but then Uranus popped back into Taurus. It's not done there yet. These are big shakeups. Like we've had a lot of big shakeups in our earthly reality, which is what Taurus holds the energy of. But we're not done yet. We still got to get through a few more real, unexpected twists and turns before we move into the freedom of Uranus in an air sign, ready to zoom, ready to pulse in a frequency way. So all of those energies that I already talked about are sort of like stamped into this new moon chart. So the moon and the sun here at the end at 28 degrees 50 minutes of Aquarius. You can find in your chart where you have that, the very second to last degree to the last degree, the very end of Aquarius. That's going to be opposing the end of Leo, and that's going to be squaring the end of Scorpio and the end of Taurus. And so the next thing that happens, we have this eclipse happening where we have, I feel like I've talked about that enough earlier in the podcast here today, but the idea that something shifts that you can't quite put your finger on and that's completely out of your control and probably a bit karmic. And it may be happening on the mental level because of the air sign quality of Aquarius. It also may be happening in other themes of Aquarius, which have to do with the collective and humanity and innovation and things that are actually connecting and like I picture like the grid of humans in local communities helping each other, like that kind of energy. On the 18th of February, the sun moves into Pisces. So we have this like powerful eclipse energy just at the tail end of Aquarius before the sun shifts into Pisces, bringing a whole fresh new zodiac energy to the quality of our life force, to the quality of how the sun shines its light codes and works with us in our daily lives every day, creating the feeling of the zodiac wheel being a year of time. So we'll enter Pisces season. Pisces has a softness to it. It's watery, it's psychic, it's dreamy and creative. And so it can have that feeling. There might be some, whatever the kind of shakeup energy is that's happening, we might need to dissociate a little bit from it. It might be a little bit too much. And we just need to sort of like peace out a little bit or do something creative and kind of get in our own flow state and take a break. Try not to dissociate in a negative way. Try to stay present to yourself and choose the Pisces, the highest vibes of Pisces, instead of um, being in a reflexive, dissociative state to what your nervous system is dealing with. So, and like in the therapy world, I talk about creating your container, making your container to be able to hold your nervous system and stay toward your window of tolerance and use your tools and your resources to get yourself to as much of a coherent state, a regulated, calm state as you can to be able to stay conscious. That's the goal, to stay conscious. On the 20th is the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune at the 0 degrees of Aries point. Historical astrologers have said that this has never happened before at this point. I've also heard that maybe 6,000 or so years ago, there was a conjunction close to this point, but we're still talking about 6,000 years ago. So this is way more than once in a lifetime energy. This is a renewal of both Saturn at the 0 degree point of Aries and Neptune at the 0 degree point of Aries, both having their own individual renewal energy, but happening together. So they're having to work as a team. They don't necessarily have a natural cohesion or collaborative energy. So it's very much like two different co-teachers or co-facilitators running a group around reinvention of self. And I say reinvention of self because it's happening here at the 0 degree point of Aries. Aries is about the self. It's about being in your self energy. It's about being strong in your ego, like positive ego, like having a sense of purpose, having a sense of identity that is anchored to something like it has like a valiance to it. Like it's like there's something bigger than yourself that you're here for. It's a fire sign. It's an initiation energy. So that, there's probably thousands of podcasts of astrologers talking just about that conjunction, multiple episodes. So you can find deep dives on that anywhere you go. But for you, where you're going to be feeling this and working with it, is wherever you have that 0 degrees of Aries in your chart. Do you have planets or points there? What house is that happening in? It doesn't matter what house system you use, it's going to make sense to you, whichever one you resonate with. If you're looking at my screen, I have this pulled in Placidus, but this is not a person's birth chart. This is the event chart of the eclipse. What else do I want to say about that? I love when I think about Aries, I'm always trying to think of like what's the best sort of like archetype of each zodiac energy so that we can understand like what that is, what's the highest octave of Aries. And I think a lot about the way of the peaceful warrior. I think about having strength and fortitude and a willingness to stand up and to show up and to protect, but at the same time, not being on the offensive, being ready, but not being the aggressor. Okay. So this is a time of patience. This is a time of kind of tracking your own urges, your impulses. Aries has to do with impulses and regulating yourself back to a place of a mature warrior that knows when the time and the place is for the surge or the initiation or perhaps the protection or the fight, but waiting until that time. If you have strong connection to Neptune, you're probably going to feel more the Neptunian side of this transit. If you have more of a connection to Saturn, you're going to feel more the Saturnian side of the transit. And that kind of push-pull between these two co-facilitators will be happening deep inside the psyche of all of us. The internal conflict that we all have over something right now is in part a reflection of this conjunction happening. So how do you know if you have strong Neptune in your chart? If you're a Pisces, if you have Pisces in any of your big three, if you have a lot of water sign energy in your chart, if you have Neptune on your ascendant, if you have Neptune conjunct your sun or any of your big three, if you have a stellium in water, three personal planets, something like that, these would be some of the ways that you'd be quite Neptunian with this energy. A strong Saturn would be if you have Capricorn or Aquarius energy in your chart. If you have Capricorn, or sorry, Saturn in any of those same places I said, like Saturn very close to your sun, Saturn close to your moon, close to your rising. Saturn in the first house would be another example of having a strong Saturn. Those are the ways that you're going to feel more of the Saturnian side of it. So that's one way to work with it is to know your own Saturn in your birth chart or to know your own Neptune in your birth chart. These are both ways to work really deeply with these energies and get more of that personal, spiritual, karmic healing level of depth as these transits move through. I think as astrologers, we're, when we're sort of giving the report and we're like, oh, da da da, and this day this happens, and this day this happens, and oh my God, this has never happened in 6,000 years. The interpretation on a superficial level can be like, oh my God, well, the world's going to end or some big thing is going to happen. It does not mean that. It mean the big thing can be a shift so subtle that only you will ever notice that it's happening beneath the surface or within the architecture of yourself. It might not even show on the outside, but for you, that could be massive, right? That's kind of how these energies work with us, especially when we're taking this kind of transpersonal, evolutionary way of looking at astrology and working with kind of depth psychology combined with astrology. By the way, I did open up some readings. If anybody wants to do a discounted chart reading with me, when I have time, I do recorded readings, and then that way I can do them for $180. I'll put a link in the show notes below for that as well. You can grab one. I have several. I'll take the link down once the spots sell out. So as long as you see the link here, it is available. Grab it. Um, I think we'll be talking a lot about the Saturn Neptune conjunction in future podcasts because we're not going to really know what it is. It's like we don't have the shape of it yet. So I'm just going to kind of pause this here and let you feel your way through that, study your way through that. That's kind of already a difference between Neptune and Saturn. Saturn would feel its way or sorry, Neptune would feel its way and Saturn would want to know and understand a little more. So after that conjunction on the 25th, I find this just very fascinating. The next kind of cascade or the order of the energies here. On the 25th is when Mercury stations retrograde. Where? at 22 and a half degrees of Pisces. Okay. So Mercury has moved all the way through the sign of Pisces and or mostly all the way through, and it's going to be stationing retrograde at 22 and a half degrees. So getting real close to the end. The end of the sign is 29 degrees. So it's like Mercury, which is about how we know things, how we understand things, how we perceive, how we communicate, how we are in our day-to-day life. Mercury has sort of gathered all this Piscean energy. The timing being so interesting to me that it's just at the tail end of both Neptune and Saturn having finished their long moving through. Saturn year, it's a little Neptune has been there. It first peaked into Pisces in the summer of 2010 and then came to stay in the early spring of 2011. So that's 15 years that Pisces has had Neptune moving through. And now it's like Mercury is a few times a year, but so in very specific places in the chart. So I always think about it like this is where Mercury wants to teach. This is where Mercury wants you to listen or repattern your thinking or shift your perception on something here. So it's looking back at Pisces. It's like a review of what all this has been. I think this has been so big that it will be taking time and effort for us to sit with and make sense of after the dust settles, so to speak. So Mercury is going to be retrograde until March 20th. Also interesting because that's the time that the sun will come through Pisces and the Mercury sect. That's a very clear signal to me. That is the energy. That's the real ignition of the Aries degree or Aries 0 degree point where Saturn and Neptune have their conjunction. I think we have a month until we really get going with what that energy is because that's when the sun sparks it and that's when Mercury says, let's move forward. There's something about it's again that kind of way the peaceful warrior, like we're waiting. We're looking at the blueprint, we're looking at the plans, we're looking at the map, we're gathering information, we're sitting with our knowing, we're sitting with our intuition, we're letting things play, we're trusting the timing, we're trusting the process, we're letting things exist on their own, in their own essence, before inserting any kind of personal push or force or agenda that isn't in the highest of the collective, Aquarius. It's interesting. And then the twist, there's a twist, February 27th, Mars squares Uranus. This is very, it's big energy. Mars has to do rule Aries, like 0 degree Aries thing happening. And Mars is the sacred masculine and the how we take action, how we move through our lives. In your own personal chart, your own Mars will definitely be activated. So even if you don't understand the zodiac signs, if you know where you have Mars by element, is it in water, air, fire, earth? That will help guide you Mars transits, how you deal with Mars energy. So whatever the element is that you have Mars in, do the thing that matches that element. Fire wants you to move or start something, get something going. Water wants you to feel the emotion. Earth wants to walk, take the steps, touch something tangible, hold something in your hands. Air wants you to think the thoughts. Let your mind shift. Let the connections happen. Let the community. Same day, by the way, and this to be so karmic and this fate energy here, because the same day that Mars squares Uranus, the sun will be conjunct the North Node. And this is kind of a little goodbye kiss because the sun will not be here in Pisces again with the North Node in Pisces for 36 years. I was trying to think if I had the date in my head. I don't have the exact date in my head, but it's going to be a long time. I just lied to you. It's 18 years. It's going to be in 18 years. I'm sorry. I have too many different timelines happening. Um, which reminds me of something I'm going to tell you about Saturn and Neptune, which that's probably what bring moment. So the North Node is going to be moving on, and the nodes move backwards. So the nodes are going to be moving into Aquarius and Leo and shifting their summer, which is kiss. This is the last, the sun kind of shining that warmth, that understanding, that consciousness, that solar energy on to have the North Node for the last year and a half, moving through Pisces. So there's just still, again, this like Pisces review and understanding and really getting it. And if you don't get it here, you're going to get it there. Like there's just sort of everywhere we look, there's Pisces lessons and energy. Even though we've got all this stuff moving into Aries, even though we have Pluto bringing us back to like, hello, about to have some really positive, exciting connections with planets as they move through Aries, which we're going to get to soon. So here's what I wanted to tell you. Uh, the let me start with the places in your chart because I didn't finish that up. So the Mercury retrograde is all these. Actually, I don't have here the degree it goes back to. I think it's 9 degrees. I think it's 22, 23 degrees back to 8 or 9 degrees of Pisces. And that's the part of your chart, which is basically the entire sign of Pisces, really, where you wanted to be. I tell you how much there's so many frequency things happening. Okay, so Mercury is the glyph of Mercury. He's got these little antennae, and I picture he is just a receiver, receiving signal, and you're giving out your signal. And let me just tell you, everything that happens in your life, very complex, but is happening because of your signal, the signal you give out. So the more consciousness you can hold, the more energy bring to your emanating through your body like an electric current and coming through in its highest and best heart open space of your soul frequency, your bone frequency, who you really are here. That is how you manifest. That is how you connect and call things into your life. That is how you will get through rumblings and the things that are certain to happen in the collective over the next year, this wild year, this ride that we're on. But what I also wanted to tell you, 1989, if you were around back then and aware enough, old enough to remember, that was the last time that we Saturn. I'm going to go back to that. This is the February 20th Saturn Neptune conjunction happening at the 0 degrees of Aries point. In 1989, it didn't happen in Aries. It happened elsewhere. I believe it was in Capricorn. But think about how much shifted in the world, in the zeitgeist, in human consciousness around that time and after. Like it wasn't necessarily right exactly then, but a lot of things shook loose. A lot of things shifted and moved and started to pave the way for growth and hope. And, I think of Neptune as like bringing hope and then Saturn bringing the reality. So when I blend those energies, that's one way that I think of it. It's like bringing the real plan to what we've hoped for, that kind of energy. Okay. How else do I want to tell you to work with this? So I've given you a lot of ways, I think, to work with your chart, but sitting with the Pisces section is really important. I think understanding the house and whatever you have in that 0 degrees Aries point, that's just going to get hit again and again this year and throughout the spring, especially. I think understanding your own personal Saturn placement by zodiacal Neptune placement by zodiac and by how you're working with this conjunction energy. I think working with your Mars as we get late in the month and we have that Mars Uranus, I want to say like whack-a-mole. That's not usually the energy I describe here, but like just the heads kind of rumbly, quick shift energy. I'm like, what? I had a client earlier talking about like in the old Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoons, how there would be like the boulder stick sort of like holding the pressure of the boulder. And that's very much this energy with Uranus at the end of Taurus, and then Mars kind of like activating that square. Late this month, it's just like no. But how to work with it and understand that in your charts, where have you had Uranus working with you all through Taurus? What do you have there? What's changed? What's changed for you in the last 2018, 6 years, last 6 years, 6, 7 years? What's changed in your reality? What's changed in your ability to resource your of what's still meant to be life in. Okay, so that you can see there's a lot of nervous system stuff. There's a lot of sitting with uncertainty and having a mindfulness practice with that. There's, I would say, a lot of anytime you can get to nature connection, trusting the process, that kind of energy, sitting with uncertainty, that kind of energy. That's kind of your homework this month. Okay, grab the planner. I'm telling you, it really helps when you can lock this down into paper. I'm just going to show you. Look what I do in mine. Yes, I have my own planner for myself. I actually draw my chart wheel and I take all the information from over on the calendar side of it and plug chart and really work with it. In a school too. I'll put that in the show notes where you can learn how to do this because it really is so helpful to get some distance and some space from the energies that feel so personal and so real in your ego and your psyche, and to understand that you are just dance with the cosmos, and ordinary cycles of energy will help you so much to have more awareness, be more in your wholeness, show up in presence in your life, even when things are chaotic and crazy out there. Anyway, sending you love. I will connect with you soon.